the technical difficulties may not be as much as we thought, but I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the New York State Cemeteries Board, and I'm Mark Pattison. I am representing, for the time being, Rosanna Rosado, Secretary of State, and Chair of the Board.
Thomas Fuller with the New York State Department of Health, representing Dr. Howard Zucker for the time being.
And this is Jill Faber, representing Attorney General Letitia James.
Great. Okay. So we're doing this. I think I'm going to ask Joe Ball, who is the once and future counsel to the board, to make sure we understand what rules we're operating under. So Joe, can you just quickly, or maybe I'll just do it, that we are operating pursuant to this new statute, which allows a remote attendance by WebEx or phone. We have two board members present, so it's really an in-person meeting with one person doing it remotely. Is there anything else I need to add, Joe, to that?
No, the public has the ability to hear the meeting as it's taking place, and part of Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021.
Thank you, Joe. This meeting is also being recorded. Again, to our participants, if you can mute your line when you're not speaking, that would be great. Also, because we'll get an echo otherwise. Also, when time comes, there will be public comment session. When the time comes, please identify yourself. If you are a lobbyist, we'd like you to identify yourself anyway so that we can make a better translation of the meeting into the minutes. And I think we'll have an executive session today. If we go into executive session, we will not adjourn the meeting, or not end the meeting, but go to executive session, then come back out, report on any actions taken, and then adjourn the meeting. So again, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so I don't know if we can fix that, but if you do have your line open, please mute your line so that we can cut down on the echo. The next first order of the meeting is discussion of the previous minutes. The minutes were sent out to board members. Does anybody have any suggestions, questions, or changes to the minutes as mailed or distributed?
No questions.
No, none for me either.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Minutes are approved. Thank you. We're going to have a brief legislative and regulation report from our counsel, Joe Ball. Joe, do you want to step in here?
Now he's muted.
You might be muted, Joe. Joe, we can't hear you. I love it when a plan comes together. Why don't we put the legislative and regulations report on hold? Louis, are you prepared to give a division report?
I guess I can't use the excuse that I'm on mute. Sure. First of all, we have, in fact, the long-awaited hiring of new staff has occurred. Carrie Perezzi, our new associate accountant, is here. Elena Montenegro is off today, but she works Monday and Wednesday through Friday, but not Tuesdays. So she is our administrative assistant for Albany, so they're here. Welcome. We are just finishing up interviews for 2 senior accountant positions, and hopefully we'll have some good news on that front as well. That's number one. I would have thought the agenda would be right here, but it's not, so give me a second.
Annual report season approaching.
Yep, let me just call it up. I don't want to fly by seeing my pants here. Hang on. Okay. Yep, the annual reports, yeah, we typically get most of our annual reports in February and March. Our annual report season is approaching. Again, we are not going to be sending out copies of the annual report form. We are going, so if you need to do a paper form, you can get it off our website. If you have no access to the internet and or no printer, you can call us, and in that case, we'll mail you one. But we really want to encourage everybody who can to try doing them online. We are above 30% in online submissions, I believe, as of last time I checked. So this is a good thing, and it makes our life easier because then all of your data is captured and inputted, and we don't have to go type stuff, which means that we have better data and less chance of mistakes and what have you. The rulemaking. I know Joe would ordinarily council would ordinarily comment on this. Just a reminder, the comment period for our Abandonment Regulations closes on Monday, November 29th. So please give us a, if you have comments on those, please get them in. We do have ones from NYS. We got them, I think, yesterday or the day before. Okay, there's actually something missing for you here, so we'll do Niagara Falls Memorial Park first. Niagara Falls Memorial Park has, before the board has acted, applied to for approval of court approval of a PM loan to finance the purchase of a new retort. We believe we worked out an agreement with the attorney for the cemetery to get in there, finish our audit to verify their numbers, and be prepared to make a recommendation both on the retort replacement, which frankly we think is a good idea, and the requested PM loan at next month's meeting. The Attorney General, I believe, is finally can confirm the details of that. They're representing us in court in Niagara County, and you'll be seeing that next month. There's nothing to do on that this month. Last, and certainly not least, some good news from Suffolk County. There's Cedar Grove Cemetery in Patchogue has two interesting things going on. Number one is they will soon be installing a historical marker for Austin Rowe, who was buried in the cemetery. Austin Rowe was part of a spy ring that delivered information to George Washington during the Revolutionary War. He's buried there. It's one of the oldest burials in the cemetery, and it's good that they're going to be able to mark this occasion. The other, I don't have the sailor's name, but the final identified remains of a sailor from the USS Oklahoma, who was from Patchogue, are being brought back by the Navy from whatever facility they were being held in, having been raised from Pearl Harbor, and are going to be reinterred in Patchogue with honors from the Navy on December 4th. So, two sort of interesting and positive historical things going on at Cedar Grove Cemetery at Patchogue in Suffolk County. That is all I had for this report. Should we do the vandalism report?
Well, why don't we just stop there, though? Do any board members have any questions for Louis on the division report?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No, I have no.
Thank you. I'll just go back up to see if Joe is able to get in. Joe, are you available? All right, and we won't be able to, I don't know what will happen when we get to the other stuff.
Somebody should probably just run upstairs.
Is he here?
He's here. He's in the office.
You don't have to run upstairs.
Why don't I run upstairs while you?
I'm
do
assuming he
the
can
vandalism
hear us
report?
and we have to, have his presence.
Right, but he has to.
He was off, I mean, he was not on the screen on my laptop when I went in there.
Why don't you send him an email?
I have an idea. You give the vandalism report, I'll call.
Okay.
So Alicia is gonna give the vandalism report.
The 2021 calendar year vandalism collections are $569,218. Assessment collections are $318,922. Fiscal year collections from April 1st, 2021 are vandalism, $137,393. Assessment, $75,997. Payments from the $2 million 2021-22 vandalism fund appropriation include the first 25 payments and 175 payments for the 11 applications so far approved and 5 payments for prior year's applications. Total payout so far is $177,079.27. There remains $108,254 of funds committed for the 2018-19 and 2019-20 applications, and $165,471 committed for applications approved in the 2020-21 fiscal year. There are 4 applications in the pipeline for approval, totaling $133,699. Additionally, there are 4 applications on the agenda for this meeting, totaling $83,935.67. So far this year, we have approved 11 restoration applications totaling $475,092.07.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions for Alicia in terms of the vandalism report? Okay,
No.
so we're sort of stalled here, trying to get our council.
Somebody's gonna stick his head in.
Just came up on the screen, it says join the call.
If that doesn't work, we should just
Is he on?
recess for 2 minutes and I'll go
Something just came up on the
upstairs.
screen that said he joined the call.
Joe, are you on?
Yeah, my computer died. I just kicked it and it came back to life.
I love that. All right, Joe, I think we've.
I apologize.
No, no,
Did you, is the meeting done?
Never without your able presence. Do you have anything to report on legislation and regulations, Joe?
Information I have, and it's courtesy of Rob Vandalism, who I'm pinch hitting for this week or this month. The bill that was dealing with a standalone, or a grandfathered crematory in the town of Tonawanda has passed and signed into law. The Abandonment Regulations, the notice of proposed rulemaking, was published on the 29th of September. 60-day public comment period hasn't ended yet. As of October 25th, Rob reports that he has received no comments.
Okay, I think we have got comments from NYSAC, just came in. Okay, so anybody have any questions of Joe on the pending legislation and regulations?
No questions.
All right, we're gonna keep muscling this through. Thank you, Joe. We're gonna move to the vandalism applications. The first one is a vandalism application, a hazardous monument application from Maplewood Cemetery in Cayuga County in the amount of $11,505.50. Do we have someone presenting that application?
This is Mike Seelman. I received the application for Maplewood Cemetery. I went out and saw the 15 monuments that they had requested, and I determined that they did appear to be hazardous. Everything appeared to be in order, and I recommended approval in the amount of $11,505.50.
Thank you, Mike. Joe, do you have any comments about this application?
I did share, I apologize for doing this late yesterday, question about whether the cemetery has determined that it was unable to locate the owners of the monuments involved.
Mike, you
Yes.
want to address that?
Yes, so what I did was, I contacted the cemetery representative and asked them if they had attempted to directly contact the lot owners for these 15 different monuments. And the cemetery said no, they did not. They did not have records for these people, and therefore they relied on the legal notice, which they didn't, and they did not receive any response to the legal notice. I then went and looked, and this is not only true for Maplewood, but all 4 of the applications that are before the board today. We went and we looked at the application and looked at the monuments and determined most of these monuments are from the late 1800s. The most recent one I found in Maplewood was 1918. So to answer your question, Joe, no, they did not make contact, or they did not make an attempt other than posting the legal notice to contact the lot owners.
So I don't know that we've ever had a discussion of this issue at the board level. It's possible we did before my time. Our view, my view, Mike's view, the 2 of us talked about this yesterday, is that where your most recent interment of all 4 of these cemeteries is 1923, there's really no point, even if the cemetery does have some type of address, for them trying to write to the lot owner, because there's no way that a 100-year-old address is still going to be good. And it's, whatever the case may be for a recent interment, say the last 25 years, or an interment where the cemetery's had recent contact from the lot owner, it simply doesn't make sense to make them go through the motions of attempting to contact people in a situation like this.
That's the statute requirement.
Joe? Mark's asking what the statute requires, so I guess we need the exact statutory language.
Louis, I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. But
Sorry, what's the
statute?
exact, yeah.
Okay, I'm still having a little difficulty hearing you. I apologize.
What's the exact statutory language on this?
With me.
Do you hear Mark any better than you hear me?
I don't know.
I mean, I can call it up.
The section is 1510-A. It says 60-day notice shall be given by registered or certified mail to the last known owner. I think it's owner of the monument. And it says in the event that the last known owner cannot be found, that's when you can give notice by publication. Now, the statute doesn't. The statute's silent on exactly what you have to do to determine that the last known owner can't be found. I would tend to agree when you have monuments that are 100 or more years old, that any records that the cemetery conceivably has with respect to an address for that owner is no longer going to be useful. Attention should be paid to this provision. Going forward, make sure, especially as you just said, Louis, with regard to newer monuments, there may be a need for the cemetery to send the notice by the registered or certified mail. And then to determine, hey, we just can't locate these owners, so we're going to serve by publication.
So what I would propose in this case, Mark, is these are all 100 years old. There's not been any contact with these owners. This is kind of an academic issue in this case. For next month, we'll put together and share it in advance, a specific proposal where we think, for council to vet, where we think it's not in cemeteries, the circumstances under which the cemetery can just presume to not be able to contact versus situations where they would actually have to mail or call or use whatever records they have or give us a more detailed explanation.
As long as Joe believes that this application is legally sufficient, and I tend to think it is, I'm fine. I do think that the statute's the statute, and the cemeteries should go through some process of due diligence. That's what the statute requires. And whether or not we can give them some guidance about that, some effort should be made by the cemetery to assess their records and make a determination, at least to document that they've looked at that issue. I don't know what other board members think. I would say that this application is legally sufficient, and they did post a legal notice, and I would make a motion to approve the application from Maplewood Cemetery in the amount of $11,505.50. Any other comment, discussion?
No, I'll second that.
Seconded, Jill?
I agree, and I agree with approving it. But I do think that it makes sense to consider some criteria, because just leaving it up to common sense, which in this case certainly common sense dictates that they're not going to be able to locate these lot owners, the monument owners. But I do think it becomes a slippery slope if we don't define the process that they need to go through, because there will be situations where the graves are old but not that old, and so I think some thought should be put into being clear with the cemetery about what they need to do.
Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Jill. The next application is West Genoa Cemetery in Cayuga County, the amount of $10,979.85. Mike, are you doing this one too?
Yes, I am. West Genoa Cemetery submitted an application for 10 monuments. I went to the cemetery, found the 10 monuments, and determined that they did appear to be hazardous. The only noteworthy thing here is that these monuments were quite a bit larger than the monuments in the last application. And that is reflected in the average price of repair. They had the two estimates. They did post a legal notice, and I've recommended approval in the amount of $10,979.85.
And for the record, they also did not do anything particular to find past lot owners. They had old addresses and went straight to legal notice.
That is correct. The information I gave you before about the dates, I included this cemetery in my review of the dates. These were primarily very old monuments. It is actually the same person who submitted the application. She's active in both cemeteries. And again, they did not have records. They did not reach out and try to locate the specific lot owners. They only relied on the legal notice.
Okay. So we've discussed it in the previous application. So I'll make a motion to approve the application of West Genoa Cemetery for hazardous monuments repair in the amount of $10,979.85. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries. Thank you, Jill. Next cemetery application for hazardous monuments, Clearview Cemetery, in the amount of $33,868.14 in Steuben County. Is someone going to?
Brendan?
Brendan?
Yeah, this is Brendan Stan with the division. We got Clearview Cemetery, Town of Cohocton, Steuben County. They submitted this application for the repair of 30 hazardous monuments. I visited the cemetery, reviewed the monuments. They did appear to be hazardous. And I am therefore recommending approval and the amount of the lower estimate. Similar to the others, I have not been able to contact, have not yet received a response from the person that submitted this application, but my assumption is they went straight to the legal notice for the same reasons as the previous applications.
Okay. Anybody have any questions of Brendan on the application?
Just to clarify,
Make a
so
motion.
it's just, when you say the same reasons, we're talking about very, very old monuments as well?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the application of Clearview Cemetery in the amount of $33,868.14. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tom seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, motion carries. Application is approved. The last one we have is from Pleasant Valley Cemetery in Steuben County in the amount of $27,582.14. Brendan, are you presenting that as well?
Yes, sir. Pleasant Valley Cemetery, Town of Urbana, Steuben County. They applied for funds to repair 29 hazardous monuments. This is their second application, at least second in my tenure. It's a large cemetery, so this is just a further batch. They probably have some more to go. I visited the cemetery. The monuments did appear to be hazardous, and I am recommending approval in the amount of the lower estimate. And similar to the other three, they went straight to the legal notice due to lacking records for these older monuments. I have not been able to confirm that yet with the cemetery representative, but I have no reason to believe that's not true in this case as well.
All right, we'll deal with this issue, in between meetings. Any other questions about Pleasant Valley Cemetery hazardous monument application?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve the application of Pleasant Valley Cemetery in Steuben County in the amount of $27,582.14. And I'm going to revise all of the other ones to say subject to appropriation, available appropriation, which you seem to have, just to make sure that that's on the record.
Mark, let's make that subject to availability of funds.
Availability of funds.
Appropriations.
Yeah, thank you. Availability of funds. Do I have a second, which includes an amendment to all the other ones with the same language about the availability of funds? Thank you,
Second.
Jill. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Applications are approved. Thank you for that. We're sort of still struggling through. Now to applications for major renovations or other things. First one on the list is Garland Cemetery for a columbarium. I don't know if it's new or added.
Brendan, that's you, right?
Yeah, 3 in a row for me. We got Garland Cemetery, located in the town of Clarkson, Monroe County. They have applied for approval of a 48 niche columbarium unit. This will be their first columbarium unit. They've seen an increase in cremation interments in recent years, which is consistent with other cemeteries across the state, and their research and general knowledge suggests that there's sufficient demand for this product. The columbarium unit is a prefabricated, coming from a manufacturer in Alberta, Canada. The foundation has been poured. It's ready to be installed, as soon as approved. It was approved by the cemetery's board. There was a little wrinkle with the advertisements as far as posting the signs, but the appropriate signs have now been posted. The attached division financial information was favorable, so therefore we recommended approval of this unit, stipulated that they not install this unit until the expiration of the comment period on November 30th, 2021, without having received any substantive adverse comments.
I'm gonna just propose a slight tweak to our recommendation, which is that we approve it subject to the installation until after November 30th, as Brandon suggested, and subject to the cemetery providing us with any comments other than we're interested in buying. Or I guess any comments. They get comments saying we're interested, might as well. It's a simpler resolution, and that way it's not on the cemetery to determine what's substantive and adverse. That will be up to us.
Well, what if you get something you think substantive?
Then we'll bring it back, then we'll ask them to hold off and bring it back to the board in December.
Okay. Okay, well, Joe, did you have any comments about the application from Garland Cemetery?
I had one minor point, or at least I hope it's a minor point, regarding the approval by the trustees of the cemetery. It appears that they approved the purchase of one model at a full meeting of their board, and they later decided to buy a different model, but that modification was made not at a full meeting, but by polling the members by email. The information seems to indicate that it was not a unanimous vote by all trustees to switch from the originally approved model to the model they now want to go with. And under the not-for-profit corporation law, trustees of a not-for-profit corporation can agree to an action without a meeting as long as it's a unanimous agreement. So I would suggest that we ask the cemetery to either have a full meeting of the Board of Trustees to ratify the fact that they are now going to be purchasing this different model, or to do it without a meeting, but to have unanimous consent.
Okay. Anybody?
Ideally by November 30th.
Well, it's up to them.
Right, but
Right.
it'd be nice to meet for it to all get done at once.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about this application? I'll make a motion to approve the application of Garland Cemetery for a columbarium with the stipulations that they, not proceed till after November 30th when the legal notice requirements end, that they forward to the division any comments received regarding the placement of the columbarium, and that they confirm at a full board meeting or by a unanimous polling the choice of the columbarium. They make that, they take actions to confirm that and to transmit that information to the division. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries. The next application is Locust Valley Cemetery regarding a land swap.
So there might be some different ways of conceptualizing this. I view this as two things going on at once. Locust Valley Cemetery in Nassau County has a neighboring property where the owners of the house next door, their driveway crosses cemetery property. The property was acquired in, I think, 1979 from a school district. The driveway has an associated easement with it. There is also a 30-foot setback requirement from the village for any burials from the edge of the cemetery's property going back. The cemetery is proposing to do a couple of things here. Essentially, they want to swap a piece of land behind the homeowner. They're acquiring that to one that's sort of off to the side, which they will give to the homeowner. The two parcels are valued at exactly the same price, $18,200. In addition, the cemetery, after originally proposing to rebuild this driveway that's partially on its property and partially on the neighbor's property, is now proposing to pay the neighbor the cost of relocating the driveway, the cost of all of the associated legal approvals and expenses. And as part of the driveway relocation, a portion of the easement is going to be extinguished. So the cemetery will gain unrestricted use of that little piece of property. The result of all of this is going to be the creation of freeing up land that will now be usable for 69 new graves and 6 mausoleum spaces. The cemetery is very low on inventory. My recollection, they've got about a half an acre left. They're running low on inventory, and this will provide them with a significant, immediate increase in inventory. They've been especially effective at selling lots for private mausoleums. The land swap, I would say, is for fair market value because the two parcels being exchanged are worth exactly the same thing. I'm going to note we only had them get one appraisal in this case. The value of the land is under $20,000. It's a teeny parcel. We think that on these circumstances, as the board has in the past, for a de minimis land transaction like this, we don't need 2 appraisals. As far as the rest of it is concerned, the major alteration, building the driveway is going to, A, improve their relationship with their neighbors, because the neighbors seem to want it done, and B, give them, the graves are approximately, I have it here, it's either 38 graves that are now already 38 graves and 4 mausoleum spaces are already owned by the cemetery and are going to be freed up by this transaction. Another 31 graves and 2 mausoleum spaces are located on the land that they are receiving in the swap. The major alteration is A, going to be good for the neighbors. The neighbors are going to be happy with having a straighter driveway. B, it will result in, despite what the cemetery is paying to rebuild this driveway, they're going to come out way ahead on that piece, looking solely at the graves that are in that driveway area that are being freed up. So, taking a step back a bit, Locust Valley has been a very successful cemetery in Nassau County. They've also been very aggressive at, where possible, acquiring adjoining land to be able to extend the life of the cemetery. They've also worked very nicely with their village in getting, Nassau County has a special statute about acquiring cemetery land, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to acquire cemetery land in Nassau County. The cemetery's done very well with dealing with local and county officials in getting done what they need to do to be able to acquire these properties, develop them, and extend the life of the cemetery. So for all these reasons, we're recommending approval both of the land swap and of the major alteration, with one proviso, two provisos. I believe they have all of their local approvals they need, but we would ask that the remote the board's approval be contingent on them receiving all the local approvals they need. The other condition, this is after discussion with council, the other condition we're recommending is that the cemetery deposit the value of the land swapped, the land to be sold. In other words, $18,200 into its permanent maintenance fund. Just transfer that from general to permanent maintenance. We will leave for another day whether there actually is a legal requirement that in a land swap, the value of the land going out be restricted to PM. In this case, the cemetery is willing to do it, and given that they're willing to do it, given that it helps help them build their PM fund a little bit, there's no reason not to add that condition.
Okay. Joe, do you have other comments for the board?
No, not right now. I know Mr. Colgrove, I believe, is on the line, and he may want to speak for the cemetery.
All right. Is there someone from the cemetery which would like to address the board?
Yes, good morning. Peter Colgrove. I'm the attorney for the Locust Lake Cemetery. We've been working on this project now, really starting for about 9 years ago when we went into discussions with our neighbor, William and Kim Esposito, for a small little transfer of 4,000 and change square feet of property from the cemetery to them and vice versa back to us. There's a lot of parts to this. We received approvals from the Village of Laddingtown Zoning Board for setback variances for graves, for our mausoleums that we're proposing, for the height of the mausoleums. We received from the Zoning Board an amendment to our special use permit to allow this land exchange. Received approval from the Laddingtown Planning Board for the land exchange map. We received approval from the Nassau County Planning Commission because you need that approval to reapportion the lots, so we have approval from them. We have approval from the Nassau County Legislature. They approved the land exchange that's required under the not-for-profit law. And we think this is the last approval that we need, and that's what's contingent upon our agreement with the Espositos. And hopefully, if this board grants our application, then we'll start gearing up for the closing on this matter. Just a couple of things. Louis has been great, as always. It's a pleasure working with Louis and the whole gang there, Vince and Joe, too. Just two things. One is we actually do have a little bit more land than Louis, available land, and Louis suggested or made a comment of it. We actually have about 3 acres or so plus of undeveloped land. We had bought 2 parcels over the last 15 years, which had houses on them, which were to be developed as we went along. And so out of that 4 acres that we bought, we have about 3 acres left that can be developed. We also have a little bit up left in the existing area, particularly where we want to put these graves that can be developed. But our mind is always thinking towards the future. Our board really has 3 goals. One is to provide a service to the community and the wider community, you know, whether it's single graves, double depth graves, family plots, memorial gardens, columbariums, mausoleums. 2 is to maintain the beauty of our cemetery. Part of it was developed and designed by Frederick Olmsted over 100 years ago, which we're very proud of. And the 3rd is we want to build our endowment because we want to make sure that when we can't sell any graves anymore, which could probably be in about 15 years or 10 or 15 years, we're going to have an endowment that is sufficient in size that can pay to maintain the beauty of our cemetery. Right now, our endowment, I believe we have about $16 million, I think, in our permanent maintenance fund. We have about $5 million in our general fund, and we keep every year, we're looking and trying to project out how big our endowment should be. So that's the long-term goal for us. And the Esposito deal, it allows us to have 69 more graves, which 38 are in the easement area, which we can't develop now, but when the easement is released, we can now open those up for 38 graves, which now sell for about $8,300 a piece. There's 31 other graves, which are now within the 30-foot setback, but with the lot line adjustment, with the new lot line, they'll be on the 30-foot setback, so we can develop them. So that's the 31, so 31 plus 38, that's 68 graves. And the mausoleums, we don't really have a spot for them because what the village wants and what our plot holders want is to have mausoleums kind of tucked into a hillside so they're not really standing alone. And the Esposito property at the end of their lawn, it slopes down, and that's the perfect place to tuck these mausoleums in there. And so 4 of the mausoleums will go into land which the Espositos will convey to us. Then there's 2 other mausoleums which are on our property already, but we could never get approval for them if we didn't have this deal because they would be within the 30-foot setback, and it's doubtful the Espositos would agree to that if we didn't have this deal with them. So it's really a win-win for us. We figure that, you know, if you add up the sales of the mausoleums, which I think in our application we said about $250,000 each, but we're looking now at probably $275 each, of which we have 5 people who are definitely ready to go. And then the sale of the graves at today's prices and the interment fees, we're going to net, after we pay the Espositos and develop the property, we could be netting about close to $2 million, which is really help us and would serve a need for our community, for people who want mausoleums, and will also, you know, help us with our endowment. So this has been a very complicated little deal. And again, I appreciate Louis and Joe and Rob and Vince, all their help with this so far. And it's a pleasure to deal with them. And I appreciate your consideration of our application.
Okay, well, that was very thorough. Okay, does anybody have any questions of our applicant? Anything else?
I should have added one, just neat little fact here, two little factoids here. Fact number 1 is one of the features of the cemetery that's absolutely unique is they have these rhododendron groves with graves arranged in a circular pattern as you're coming out. I've never seen that anywhere else in the state. The other is, it is the final resting place of Rocky Graziano, which I usually note that kind of thing at the outset, just because it's, maybe humanizing the transaction isn't the right word, but to give a little context for what we're really doing.
Jill, did I hear you asking a question?
No.
No, we're good. So I'll make a motion. I can't, is Jill trying to talk? Or I don't hear you, Jill.
No, I wasn't saying anything, no.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the application of Locust Valley Cemetery's land swap, encompassing all of those things.
And major alteration.
And major alteration. And what was and is there anything, do we approve those, or we approve those?
You're approving both, and the contingencies are receipt of all required local permits, which they have, and depositing $18,200 into the permanent maintenance.
Okay, so with that noted, I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Tom seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the work you're doing.
We have a great board. We love our cemetery, and thank you for all the support you give us.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Have to come visit sometime. Yep. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Mount Olivet Cemetery. Notice of proposed penalty.
Okay, we have, just to refresh everyone's recollection, we found a series of transactions that we had questions about at Olivet. They also hadn't filed made their vandalism payments or filed the annual reports. We issued a notice of proposed penalty. They submitted a request that the board waive that penalty. We essentially agreed with them to push that all off until they got a forensic audit of the areas that we were concerned about. That forensic audit is complete, however, we have not yet seen the report. I'll have more to say about that in executive session because it's still an ongoing investigation. For present purposes, I would ask that we agree to extend the cemetery's time to they now have until November 30th to supplement their request that we waive or reduce the penalties. I'm going to ask that the board agree to extend that time till December 31st with the idea that we should have a much clearer discussion of this at our December meeting in public session. For now, it's an ongoing investigation and I would only report on some interim details in executive session.
Anybody have any questions? That, Jill? If not, I will make a motion to extend the period for Mount Olivet to respond to our notice of proposed penalty to December 31st, 2021. Is that right? Joe, I don't mean to, is there anything I need to add?
That much stuff?
Joe? Again, to reiterate what I said last time this afternoon, I'm not sure this is even necessary because they technically have already responded.
I made the motion, second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The not necessary motion carries. Last is Forest Lawn and Lancaster Cemetery proposed merger. Lewis?
Yep, so, give me a sec, it's loading. So, Forest Lawn in Buffalo has previously merged with, I believe, 5 other cemeteries in the greater Buffalo area. Lakeside, Williamsville, and Gethsemane, St. Matthews, and Buffalo Cremation. I forget its precise name. They had, about 2 or 3 years ago, engaged in a rather aggressive program to identify cemeteries where they believe both the local cemetery and they would benefit by combining. This came to a head in 2019 concerning Shenango Valley Cemetery in Boone County, at which time our former council concluded that the cemetery law as written prohibited mergers of cemeteries, among other things, prohibited mergers of cemeteries where the land was not contiguous. After a bunch of back and forth and sausage making, legislation was passed to allow such mergers under certain conditions. The Buffalo Forest Lawn Group has submitted, and 6 cemeteries have submitted applications to the board for approval of mergers. We've asked a bunch of questions about them, some of which have been answered, some of which have generated more questions. This is the first one that we feel comfortable with being ready to recommend approval on. My background, Lancaster Rural is, of the transactions here, really there are 2 of them. This one and Oakwood, which is not before the board right now, are, in the division's view, speaking very broadly, very similar to the types of mergers that the board has previously approved with Forest Lawn. They're in the Buffalo suburbs. They're really not too far out of their geographic area. There appears to be upside from more professional operation of the cemetery. There's a board that's really, at best, not anxious to continue operating the local cemetery as a individual going concern. And in this case, we reviewed the finances. There are a couple of financial anomalies is probably too strong a word, but financial things that one of our accountants has flagged. But we're looking at the transaction as a whole. We believe this is something the board should approve, looking to the specific factors under section 1506-D, the new statute allowing for these mergers. We've been through them, and we believe that they're all satisfied here. There's one I'm going to call attention to, and Joe will probably have more to say about this, because it does raise a potential legal question. The 1506-D says the plan of merger has to include a whole bunch of stuff, various types of representations, and address certain things. Forest Lawn has addressed all of those things with Lancaster, and they were all considered by Lancaster's board, and all were part and parcel of what they voted to approve. The wrinkle is that there is also a document called Plan of Merger, capital P, capital M, in the submission that does not have all that stuff. It's a very thin form document. On these facts, we're comfortable with saying that, subject to hearing from council, we're comfortable with making a recommendation that the lowercase p, lowercase m plan of merger has everything in it that the statute requires, that the cemetery that's going to cease to exist, which is really the one we're concerned about here, is going to, those representations were made to it. They are part and parcel of this transaction. And we're comfortable with the way this has been done in this case. It probably would be better if the capital P, capital M plan of merger actually addressed all of those things explicitly in so many terms going forward, so that we don't have this question. But given the vote that was held, the minutes that we've had, and the letter we have in the record from Lancaster's board president, we think it would be elevating form over substance to make them go back and redo a lot of others meeting. I'm going to also note that in this case, even though, referring back to our discussion of addresses, the statute requires that notice not be given solely by publication unless it's unduly burdensome to use other means. In this case, notwithstanding the fact that there'd probably be a really good argument that notice by mail to all of the lot owners at Lancaster would be unduly burdensome, the cemeteries in fact did that. So to make them go back and redo that, even though the transaction was clearly approved and its terms were clearly approved, because one piece of paper didn't have the stuff that was somewhere else, strikes me as being going to be a large burden on the acquiree, the cemetery whose operations won't be continuing independently. And that was all I had on this one. Again, I think that some of the other mergers that Forest Lawn has proposed, which we hope to get some of these on for December, are going to pose different issues and may very well look differently, and may even have a different recommendation. But this one strikes me as, like I said, exactly the kind of thing the board has approved in the past, and there's really no reason from a policy perspective not to approve it.
Joe, do you have any comments on the application?
Yes, I have several. The statute clearly contemplates that there would be a plan of merger. In this case, they have two different documents. One of them is called plan of merger, the other one's called agreement of merger. Whether as between the two of them, they cover everything that should be covered is an interesting question. One of the points that should be covered in a plan of merger is a discussion of the memberships of each of the constituent corporation, including specifically the number of members. In this case, the plan of merger document simply says that the members of the Forest Lawn are all of the lot owners of Forest Lawn and its other cemeteries in the group. Makes no mention of what those other cemeteries are or how many members there are in those various, in that group. The agreement of merger says that information regarding membership is set forth on Schedule 1.3. At least on the copy that I've seen of the agreement of merger, the Schedule 1.3 is not provided. So I'm not sure that the two documents together, even if you were to read them broadly as constituting together a plan of merger, I don't know that it addresses that particular topic. And I think of all the topics that are supposed to be in a plan of merger presented to lot owners for voting, the information about the relative size of the memberships and the corporations involved may be one of the more important bits of information. Another little detail, but could be significant, the plan of merger is supposed to indicate whether or not the merger will effect any change in the certificate of incorporation of the surviving corporation. The plan of merger says specifically that there will be no such change, but I believe that there will necessarily have to be a change because the merged cemetery will now be operating in the town of Lancaster, and the certificate of incorporation of the surviving corporation will have to be amended to reflect that fact. The notices that were posted at the cemeteries and on the website, again, this is a requirement specifically for cemetery corporations when they merge under the new, relatively new section in Article 15. The notice to the lot owners doesn't really give everything it should about the name and address and phone number of somebody from whom all of the information regarding the merger can be obtained. And I believe that in at least one, I believe with respect to Forest Lawn, the posting at the cemetery was tantalizingly close to 60 days before the lot owners meeting, but not quite 60 days before the lot owner meeting. The notice says it was posted on June 7th and the lot owner meeting was on August 2nd. So I'm not sure if the cemeteries are now asking us to approve or to recommend, using the statutory language, the merger with the idea that they will then go and get the boards and the lot owners to approve, or if they believe that all of the necessary board and lot owner approvals have already been obtained and now they are seeking cemetery board approval. Do you know, is that what they're seeking now?
Is there anybody from the cemetery, representing the cemetery, that'd like to respond?
Sure, David Fleming, with Forest Lawn. Just on a couple of points, if I could.
Speak up, David.
Sure. Mind if I take this off?
Yeah, I don't mind.
So you can hear me. With regard to this outstanding issue related to the plan of merger, capital P versus plan of merger, lowercase p, specifically in section 905A of the not-for-profit corporation law, there are requirements that have to be filed with the court related to a plan of merger, capital P. And those documents were submitted as part of the application. Additionally, the new statute provides for a submission of a plan of merger lowercase p, to be submitted to the cemetery board that provides a whole host of information, which, as Mr. Polishek pointed out, was in fact addressed by the cemetery and also included the plan of merger capital P drafted by the attorneys for the cemetery. It's a rather robust document. It's almost 200 pages long. Any attachment that appears to not be included certainly is easily provided. All these documents were provided to the lot owners as part of this process. And there was a question, I think, earlier, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but between calls, meetings, and everything going on between the two cemeteries, when this whole process first started, this process started in April of 2018. And there's been questions about whether or not there's been interaction between the cemetery, the two cemeteries and their lot owners. And I count 1, 2, 3. 20 instances of notices provided, of publications, of meetings, and interactions with the cemetery. And that's just a kind of a quick thumbnail where in this intervening time between when the cemeteries first started the merger process and then had the rug pulled out from underneath them and said that this process wasn't allowed to go forward and would be changed by the legislature, Forest Lawn and Lancaster continued to be in discussion. They've had a number of lot owner meetings on these documents, and they had subsequent lot owner meetings, yes, on these documents. Included in the package that the cemetery board has, and included in the package that was submitted, is a notice of the special meeting of the lot owners, which was published in the newspaper, a legal paper designated by Erie County. It was on the website. There were notices posted at the gates in any offices. There was also a mailing, which the cemeteries could have petitioned the cemetery board based on our previous conversation that we had at one of these meetings, where they could have petitioned not to mail to folks, but instead they chose to do that. And they took all these old addresses, most of which came back as undeliverable, and they did a first-class mail so they'd know that these people were these addresses were coming back. So, there has been abundant notice to the members. They've been working through this since 2018. And in fact, we are in a situation where there are a number of pending applications, as Mr. Polishek pointed out. And many of these cemeteries are close to being unwilling to continue through this process, not just with this cemetery, but with other cemeteries across New York, because they started a long time ago, and here we are finally getting there. The plan of merger and the certificate and any changes related to that, there are no changes contemplated based on counsel that's provided the documents to the cemetery board. If there is a technical change that has to be submitted, obviously the cemeteries will submit that change. Really, I think that addresses most of the issues. The only other issue I had was the fact that if there's any technical issues related to the notice, I don't think that's true. Based on the documentation that's been provided, there may be some confusion based on when specific meetings were held in a whole series of meetings. But these lot owner meetings were held previously, had to be reheld again because of the change in statute. And this is an incredibly time-consuming and very expensive process. And again, based on the documentation provided to the cemetery board, and based on any application I've seen before the board today, there has been abundant notice to the membership of both cemeteries related to this transaction. And as I would just echo Mr. Polishek's point, I think this is going to benefit both cemeteries. It's a process that's been pretty clearly presented by Forest Lawn as a way for them to increase their funds, make them more sustainable, and at the same time help the other cemeteries. So I think it is a pretty good relationship.
So I have one thing to add on the first issue Joe raised about the number of lot owners. It's something we struggle with chronically with cemeteries, although this brings us into focus. I am going to posit that there isn't a single cemetery in the state of New York that has an accurate list of its members. Because lot ownership, membership type not-for-profit corporations typically require their members to pay dues. And you can figure out who the members are by reviewing the dues rolls. Cemeteries do not require paying dues, and membership via lot ownership is, unlike, say, a church or synagogue, inheritable. So at most, the cemetery would have an incomplete list of some combination of who its original members were and who some of their successors, but not all, are. So it's actually physically impossible for a cemetery to have an accurate count of members. They could have an accurate count of lots sold, hopefully, assuming their records have been good throughout time. Not always the case, sometimes is, sometimes isn't. But you can't actually know who the members entitled to vote are just from a list. You have to have some process of when people come in to vote, they present some type of evidence that they're the person, but you're not going to know about people who don't show up.
The issue I thought was most, first of all, we want to, as I said last meeting, proceed with these applications with all due deliberate speed. We understand there's an urgency at some level with cemeteries that as a result of various factors, it's been a long time. These particular applications are relatively fresh, and we want to make sure we get it right. The one issue that I thought was important was the one about future membership of the surviving corporation, whether that had been discussed or clearly identified. I have, in some sense, no doubt conversations have occurred. It sounds like it isn't at least documented as to what the surviving membership will be. Am I saying that right, Joe?
I did, oh, I'm sorry. I believe the discussion, if I could, David, following again, was with regard to how it was described in the documents. There's no doubt that the members of the Forest Lawn Group are all members of the group, and all the lot owners are entitled to participate in the board meetings. That is clarified in the documents that are submitted. While it may not be described in a way that is desired, I guess is perhaps the question, but yes, it is addressed, and it's settled in nonprofit corporation law that all these members of these cemeteries, the lot owners, are voting members.
The way I understood Joe's concern, I don't know if I was able to unmute, was that you don't know sitting here how many of the combined entities members are going to be, like what percentage former Lancaster members will form. That'll obviously be a very small percentage. What I was getting at is, I don't think there's actually any way to know the answer to that, because there's no way of knowing who Forest Lawn or Lancaster or any other cemetery's members are.
And to your point, if I could just...
Louis, of course, you're right. Knowing that, but identifying the individuals who are members is not what the statute requires. It requires a description of the membership, including the numbers. In the context of a cemetery, I think that it would be reasonable to say each lot is entitled to one vote. I believe that's what the law contemplates. So perhaps the statute could be satisfied by the the plan of merger indicating that there are so many lots in these cemeteries, and therefore somebody contemplating a merger would know currently there are X number of lots in the Forest Lawn Group, and there are Y number of lots in the Lancaster Group. And after the merger, there will be X plus Y lots that get to vote at meetings of lot owners of the merged cemeteries. We don't need to know how many, we don't need to know who those lot owners are. It just to give a sense to all of the interested lot owners in the constituent corporations, this is how this will impact your relative voting strength. And again, don't take what I'm saying as a suggestion that this is a bad idea to merge these corporations. I'm simply pointing out this is what the statute appears to require.
And
But isn't
that's
that,
the question, Ed, is what
as
is,
you
go
point
ahead,
out,
Joe.
as you point out, Joe, it's a statutory requirement. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that the petition, the documentation should make clear that they're going to be complying with the statutory requirements. I mean, that is a statutory requirement. So I guess I'm wondering what you're looking for beyond, compliance with the statute, that all of the lot owners of the merged cemetery are now going to be voting members. I mean, I think, isn't that what the statute requires?
Well, the merger documents already say that that will be the case. What they didn't
Okay.
say is that Forest Lawn has 100,000 lots, each of which are entitled to a vote, and Lancaster has 5,000 lots, each of which are entitled to a vote, or whatever the actual numbers are. And I guess what we're talking about is, A, is that in fact what the statute requires, and B, if so, do we need to reject this and make them re-vote with plugging in that number? Assuming the cemeteries are willing to, assuming the cemetery, the smaller cemetery is willing to do another mailing to its membership as opposed to the board simply resigning and abandoning.
Yeah, I don't see it. I think that if the merged cemeteries are of relative different sizes, and the merger, the information that was provided to the lot owners with, I'm assuming, ample time to ask questions and raise that issue. I don't see that the statute is that specific as to the information. That seems quite granular as to the information that would need to be provided. I don't see that the statute would require it. As far as asking for board approval, that wouldn't be something that, to my mind, would cause us to reject this. I defer to council, but I raise that as in having reviewed merger petitions in other contexts. I don't know that would be a reason to reject it, but certainly, happy to discuss it further, though.
Is there Joe asked us at the end, what are you asking us to do? Is there are we approving it with some things to be done, or is it you've already done them and you're ready to go forward?
So they've been through this process since 2018. They've done it twice. Yeah. They're ready to move forward. I would disagree with the granular necessity of what a merger is. I mean, the documents provided are the merger documents that cite the statute and say that they have one vote. They have the ability to, under the merger, what's going to happen. And to Mr. Polishek's earlier comment, there are going to be very few cemeteries that are going to come before this board that can tell you exactly how many lots they have in their cemetery and how many lot owners that they currently have in their cemetery. Again, we've mailed to people, to graves that there are no family members. Does that mean that there isn't, well, I don't want to get into what ifs. My issue is they've had multiple meetings. They've informed all the lot owners. They've told all the lot owners pursuant to statute that they're going to be members of the corporation. They're entitled to vote under the statute, as Ms. Faber pointed out, and we point that out in the application. We believe, based on the documents that have been submitted to the board, that we've addressed every item that's required in not just the old statute, but in the new statute. And again, we have two different sections at play here. The legislature, when they unanimously passed this bill, did not whatever the document is, 903, I guess, to be amended. They in fact said that, following those sections of the nonprofit corporation law that have to be filed with the court, the Attorney General or anyone else, they're following that. In addition to that, under the new section, the cemetery shall provide the following plan of merger to the cemetery board, which this cemetery has, these two cemeteries have in great detail gone through and addressed every single one of these items, of which, based on the analysis today, this seems like a good merger in the best interest of both cemeteries. So that's what we're asking for the cemetery board to do, is to approve them moving forward at this time.
Okay, well, the board has been advised by council of some potential issues. And I think we have an option to either proceed to approve the merger or to table it for some other actions to be completed.
Well, there's obviously a third option, which is to the extent you have legal concerns, you could discuss those further in executive session and come back out and act.
I don't see the reason why you would go to executive session, particularly. Let me just test the board. Tom, do you have any thoughts?
Is there a possibility of taking a vote on it now with a condition that that other issue about the membership be addressed separately?
I don't know. I suppose that's possible, right?
I mean, I don't
see that as a
think,
deal breaker.
I don't think having another vote makes any sense here. And I'm not really crazy about the board approving it subject to there being another vote of lot owners.
I'm not sure they will.
I think it's extremely helpful to have greater clarity as to what we would ideally like to see in this process were we writing on a blank slate. So for example, I think all of the stuff that the statute says should be in the plan of merger, that ought to be one document that's presented to both sets of lot owners and voted on. I also think it would not be unhelpful for the cemetery, at least as best as they can, to state how many lots each one has in the plan of merger. So I think this is good to know going forward.
Let me just to see if Jill has a point of view.
I don't disagree with Louis. I think that's all good information to have. And I think if, going forward, if we want to clarify and make that something that should be included in the petition, and if the plan of merger is the exact document that's reviewed and approved in final form, I think that's good. However, with regard to this particular application, I do agree that what's required by statute, to my mind, has been provided. And so I think they're two separate conversations.
Yeah. All right. So, given that, again, I think the conversation is very important. I think in the sense that this conversation is before the cemetery community, where we know that merger is something that is being contemplated in a number of fronts out of necessity, that the conversation is helpful. It's the part about making sure, I think, that lot owners of the cemetery that is being merged and larger is an important one, and difficult because, again, many of those lot owners are not regularly active. Right? I agree with Lewis's point. I mean, I get notices from the cemetery that my family has been burying people in for a couple hundred years. If I had made a decision, my Aunt Nina would have killed me because I don't know, who's really the lot owner. They're just sending me one because they know I'm on the cemetery board, honestly. So it's difficult. But I would make a motion to approve the merger with the conversation that we've had is informative, not dispositive, and that given the timeframes, the issues have been addressed and they can go forward. So that's my motion.
I will second that.
Second. Any other discussion about that needs to be had? Joe, anything with that?
I can see which way the wind's blowing. No further discussion.
I love a yes attorney. All right. All in favor?
I would just,
Yep.
no,
No,
never mind.
I withdraw the aye. Joe, please make your comment. No?
I guess
Oh,
there's a
I'm
question.
sorry. I thought I was on mute for a minute. I was thinking out loud. Never mind.
I guess I do have a question for Joe. Is there anything that, is all we need here, the board saying we approve, or is there some further things that the board has to do?
Well, I believe the cemeteries will need to apply for court approval. They will, of course, have to tell the court that all this merger has been duly approved by the respective boards and members, and I guess they could represent that technically what the board should be doing is recommending the merger. That's what the statute says. So you may want to just modify the motion to say that the board recommends the merger. And then the cemeteries can seek the court approval, and at some point, I guess they're going to need an approval from the cemetery board of the actual certificate of merger when it's time to be filed.
I think that's,
Yes, Mr. Fleming, do you have any idea about how you want to address that?
No, I think the recommendation for approval and is sufficient for now. And we still have to go to court, obviously.
It's actually a question for Jill. Can you guys approve mergers now without them going to court? I think you can, right?
An AG only approval
Yes.
is what would be an AG only approval. I don't know off the top of my head with this one, no.
Mr. Fleming's saying no.
No, I'm saying I don't.
Yeah, I thought all mergers were that you could choose to go either to the AG or the court, and the AG could choose to say, I'm not commenting on this, go to court. I thought that was true of any not-for-profit.
Right, well, right, even if it's submitted as an AG only approval and the AG's office thinks that there's a reason for the not-for-profit to submit it for court approval as right, they can always advise counsel as such. Yeah.
So for present purposes, I guess I'm just asking that the resolution, that the board recommend approval of the merger, and that recommendation not necessarily be directed to anyone in particular, in case it's an either
Well,
or
I guess
situation.
that the board, the corporations are represented by counsel in this transaction, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, assuming that, and I have there's not competent counsel directing them, I think, our task here is to recommend, and then with that recommendation, counsel should advise the cemeteries, the merged entities, what the next step is. I don't know that our role is to advise in that regard.
Okay. So I'll amend my motion to recommend the approval of the merger of Forest Lawn and Lancaster Cemetery, period. I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay.
Apologies, I have one more item of business that we're going to have to vote to add to the agenda and then deal with. This is a very minor matter. Sorry, this is a very minor matter involving Forest Hill Cemetery in Utica. The board previously approved them installing a new crematory and recommended court approval of a permanent maintenance fund loan. The board conditioned that on two things. Number one, receiving all local approvals, and two, on receiving a required DEC permit. The wrinkle is that the DEC permit can't come until the crematory is ready to operate and the retort is installed. So you have a condition that can't possibly be fulfilled before it gets circulated. So my recommendation here is the AG has to put in papers next week, and there's a court date, I think, coming up. So it's a very simple recommendation, is that the board modify its approval at the May 12th approval of the Forest Hill Crematory to conditioned on receipt of all local permits and on subsequent receipt of a DEC permit.
Okay, well, let me take the issue of putting.
Joe, first of all, let me ask Joe if I got that right. Oh, wait, no, put it on the agenda first, you're right.
Let me take a motion to put an issue relating to Forest Hills Cemetery.
Forest Hill singular.
Forest Hill Cemetery in Utica, for purposes of considering modification of a previous board action. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. That's now on the agenda. Jill, did Louis get it right? Is that what you're looking for?
I was asking Joe,
Yeah.
actually.
Joe?
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, Joe and I talked about this.
Yeah,
Joe,
so
is
what
that
you're
how
saying-
we phrased it?
Louis, as I recall, the description of the issue was the original approval was conditioned on obtaining a DEC permit. The problem is that the DEC permit in question cannot be obtained until after the retort is actually installed. So if we make doing the work and taking the PM loan conditioned on getting a permit that can't be obtained until after the work is done, and of course the work can't be done until after the PM loan is taken, then we've created an impossible situation for the cemetery. So I believe the modified approval would be subject to the condition that before they begin the work and before they take the loan, they get any necessary building permits from the city of Utica, but period. And then they have to take the loan and install the retort and hope that they will get the required DEC permit after the work has been done.
Yeah, that's not
Okay,
good.
so
I don't know how we can impose we can't make a retroactive condition, because by that time, the loan will have been drawn down and the work will have been done.
Okay.
So I would propose the motion that we to modify the May 12th approval of the crematory and recommendation of approval of the PM loan to delete the condition of requiring approval, requiring the DEC permit.
Okay, I'll slightly change that. I'll make a motion to modify our May 12th action to approve to require that Forest Hill get all necessary municipal building permits, period.
I'll second that.
Second, Jill?
I agree.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We have an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board on matters that were before us, or any other matters that are pertinent to the cemetery board?
David Fleming, New York State Association of Cemeteries. Just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to participate in the public comment period for the abandoned cemetery regs. We made some technical changes, but overall are very supportive of what is being suggested. It's extremely important that we get in to help some of these cemeteries as soon as possible with giving them options And I heard this week, I just wanted to relay an anecdote, I heard this week from a Capital Region municipality that had received word of ways in which they could be helpful to prevent abandonment, which they would much prefer than having to take over the cemetery. And in many instances, some of these municipalities have zero interest or willingness to participate. So I think that this proposal, with of course made better by our recommended changes, is really a good effort to help really be advocates to these cemeteries that are struggling. In NYSAC, on behalf of NYSAC, we stand ready to work with the Cemetery Board and the Division to help get that information out there once it's been finalized. We think this is an important step.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other? No? Anyone else wishing to speak, address the board? Okay, our next meeting is December 14th. And I think now we need, I'll make a motion to move to executive session. We will not adjourn this meeting. This meeting stays open. But when we come out, we will report on any actions taken, if any.
I do not anticipate the board taking any actions.
I do not anticipate that either. And so we're moving to go to executive session. Second?
Second that.
We will go to executive session and come back out with a report and adjourn the meeting. Thank you. If you're not hanging around, I appreciate everybody's attendance. All right, we're back. I'm calling out of executive session. No action was taken. And I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, just two of us. That's all we need. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.